The crimson warning lights bathed the bridge of the Zephyrian command ship in an ominous glow as Admiral Kethvar studied the holographic display before him. His three eyes, each capable of seeing different spectrums of light, focused intently on the small blue planet rotating slowly in the center of the projection. Earth. Such an insignificant world, yet it had become the source of his greatest concern. "Status report," Kethvar commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 17 star systems without a single defeat. Commander Zixtal, his second-in-command, approached with visible unease. The usually confident officer's tentacles twitched nervously as he accessed his datapad. "Sir, our advanced scouts have completed their reconnaissance of the third planet. The inhabitants call themselves humans, and they appear to be a relatively primitive species. They have not achieved faster-than-light travel, and their weapons technology is crude by our standards." Kethvar's mandibles clicked in what might have been satisfaction. "Excellent. How long until we can begin the invasion?" "That's where we encounter complications, Admiral." Zixtal's voice carried an unusual tremor. "Our scouts, they did not return as expected." The Admiral's three eyes all focused on his subordinate with laser-like intensity. "Explain." "We sent 12 reconnaissance probes to gather detailed intelligence about their military capabilities. Only 3 returned, and the data they collected is troubling." Zixtal manipulated his datapad, and the holographic display changed to show recordings from the surviving probes. The first recording showed a human military base nestled in a desert landscape. Kethvar watched as small figures in camouflage uniforms moved with surprising coordination and purpose. "These creatures appear well organized," he admitted, "but hardly a threat to the might of the Zephyrian Empire. Watch this section, sir." Zixtal highlighted a particular sequence where the humans were conducting training exercises. What Kethvar saw made his primary heart skip a beat. The human soldiers were practicing combat scenarios that defied logic. They threw themselves into situations that should have resulted in certain death, yet somehow emerged victorious. One group of humans, vastly outnumbered by robotic training targets, used tactics that bordered on insanity. They employed explosive devices with reckless abandon, charging directly into enemy fire while their comrades provided cover. This must be some form of ceremonial display, Kethvar reasoned, though uncertainty crept into his voice. No rational species would engage in such suicidal behavior during actual combat. "I thought the same, Admiral, until I reviewed the combat footage from their recent conflicts." Zixtal switched to another recording, this one showing actual human warfare from their planet's recent history. The images that followed challenged everything Kethvar thought he knew about military strategy. Human soldiers faced with overwhelming odds didn't retreat as any sensible species would. Instead, they doubled down on their aggressive tactics. He watched in fascination and growing horror as human warriors charged machine gun nests, knowing full well they would likely die in the attempt. Yet somehow, through sheer determination and what could only be described as controlled madness, they often succeeded. Look at this particular engagement. Zixtal pointed to a scene where a single human soldier, separated from his unit and surrounded by enemies, continued fighting even after sustaining multiple wounds that should have incapacitated any rational being. The human not only survived but managed to complete his mission objective before collapsing from exhaustion. Kethvar's tactical mind raced as he analyzed what he was seeing. In Zephyrian military doctrine, self-preservation was paramount. Soldiers were valuable resources, trained at great expense and time. The idea of willingly sacrificing oneself for a strategic objective was not entirely foreign, but it was reserved for the most desperate circumstances. These humans seemed to view such sacrifice as a standard operating procedure. Perhaps they lack intelligence, Kethvar suggested. Many primitive species fail to properly assess risk. I considered that possibility as well, sir. However, look at this. Zixtal brought up technical specifications and battle plans recovered from human military databases. The documents revealed a level of strategic thinking that was both sophisticated and deeply disturbing. The humans had developed weapons designed specifically to maximize psychological impact on their enemies. They created scenarios where retreat was impossible, forcing their opponents into desperate situations where human tenacity and willingness to die for their cause became decisive factors. Their entire military philosophy seemed built around the concept that they were more willing to suffer and die than their enemies were willing to inflict and witness such suffering. This is their military academy, Zixtal continued, showing footage of human soldiers in training. They deliberately subject their own people to extreme physical and psychological stress. They break them down completely, then rebuild them into something harder and more dangerous. Kethvar watched young humans enduring conditions that would be considered torture in civilized space. They were deprived of sleep, food, and comfort while being forced to complete impossible tasks. Those who broke under the pressure were dismissed, but those who survived emerged transformed. Their eyes held a hardness that Kethvar recognized from his most battle-hardened veterans, yet these were barely more than juveniles. "They create warriors the way we forge weapons," the Admiral murmured, "through fire and pressure." The recordings continued, showing human special forces units whose capabilities defied belief. These elite warriors could survive in environments that would kill most species within hours. They could go days without sleep, sustain themselves on minimal rations, and maintain peak combat effectiveness under conditions that would drive lesser beings to madness. One particular sequence showed a human special operations team conducting a rescue mission deep behind enemy lines. The team of 6 humans infiltrated a fortified compound, eliminated dozens of guards, extracted their target, and escaped, all while carrying a wounded comrade who should have been left behind by any rational military standard. Yet they refused to abandon him, turning a simple extraction into a complex operation that put the entire team at risk. "They don't follow logical military protocols," Zixtal observed. "They make decisions based on emotional attachments. It should make them weaker, more predictable. Instead, it seems to make them more dangerous." Kethvar studied the data more carefully. The human tendency to never abandon their wounded or dead created tactical complications for their enemies. Opposing forces couldn't use captured humans as leverage because they knew with certainty that rescue attempts would follow. The psychological effect on human morale was equally significant. They fought harder, knowing their comrades would never leave them behind. "Show me their weapons technology," Kethvar commanded. The display shifted to show human military hardware. At first glance, it appeared primitive compared to Zephyrian technology. Kinetic projectile weapons instead of energy beams, chemical explosives rather than antimatter warheads, and armor that relied on simple materials rather than force fields. Yet as Kethvar studied the specifications more closely, he began to appreciate the brutal efficiency of human weaponry. "They design their weapons for reliability under extreme conditions," Zixtal explained. "A human soldier can maintain and repair his weapon using basic tools and materials found almost anywhere. Compare that to our energy rifles, which require specialized facilities for maintenance and exotic materials for ammunition." More troubling was the human approach to weapon development. They didn't just create tools for killing, they created tools for instilling fear. Their weapons were loud, messy, and traumatic. A human bullet didn't just kill cleanly. It created devastating wounds that horrified witnesses and required extensive medical resources to treat survivors. The psychological impact was as much a part of the weapon's design as its lethality. "Look at this weapon system," Zixtal highlighted a particular human invention. "They call it a flamethrower. It serves no practical military purpose that couldn't be accomplished more efficiently with conventional explosives. Its only advantage is the psychological terror it creates." Kethvar watched footage of the weapon in action and felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. The humans had weaponized fire itself, turning it into a tool of war that was as much about breaking enemy morale as destroying enemy forces. What kind of species creates weapons specifically designed to burn their enemies alive? "And this," Zixtal continued, "is what they call a bayonet. They attach bladed weapons to their projectile rifles, effectively turning every soldier into both a ranged and melee combatant. When they run out of ammunition, they charge with these blade-tipped weapons." The tactical implications were staggering. Most species, when faced with ammunition shortages, would retreat to resupply. Humans simply switched to even more primitive and brutal methods of combat. They had contingency plans for fighting with knives, clubs, rocks, and if necessary, their bare hands. The idea of surrender seemed foreign to their military thinking. "Admiral," Zixtal's voice carried a note of genuine fear. there's something else. Our xenobiologists have analyzed human physiology, and their findings are concerning. The display shifted to show detailed anatomical charts of human biology. At first, Kethvar saw nothing particularly remarkable. Humans appeared to be standard carbon-based bipeds with unremarkable physical characteristics. However, as the analysis deepened, disturbing details emerged. Their nervous system is designed for extended combat stress, Zixtel explained. When threatened, their bodies flood with chemical stimulants that increase strength, speed, and pain tolerance. Most species have similar emergency responses, but humans can maintain this state for extended periods without permanent damage. The biological data revealed that humans were essentially natural berserkers. Their fight-or-flight response was heavily weighted toward fight, and their physiology supported sustained combat in ways that most species couldn't match. They could function effectively even when severely injured, their bodies naturally producing compounds that kept them operational long past the point where other species would have collapsed. More troubling is their social structure, Zixtel continued. They form extremely strong bonds with their combat units. These brotherhood connections override individual survival instincts. A human will risk certain death to protect another human he's served alongside. Kethvar studied sociological analyses of human military culture. The bonds formed between human warriors went beyond simple teamwork or professional cooperation. They created family-like relationships that transcended rational self-interest. Human soldiers didn't just fight for abstract concepts like territory or resources. They fought for each other, and that personal motivation made them far more dangerous than an enemy fighting purely for logical reasons. "Admiral, permission to speak freely?" Zixtal requested. "Granted." "Sir, I believe we are making a grave error proceeding with the invasion of Earth. These humans, they don't fight wars the way civilized species do. They fight like cornered predators. Every tactical advantage we possess could be neutralized by their willingness to accept losses that no rational species would tolerate." Kethvar considered his subordinate's words carefully. The Zephyrian Empire had built its reputation on overwhelming technological superiority and superior numbers. They had never encountered an enemy that simply refused to acknowledge when they were beaten. Human military history was filled with examples of vastly outnumbered forces achieving impossible victories through sheer determination and willingness to pay any price for success. You're suggesting that a primitive species armed with kinetic weapons and chemical explosives could threaten the might of the Zephyrian Empire? Kethvar's tone carried skepticism, but underneath, doubt was beginning to take root. "I'm suggesting that their primitiveness might be an advantage, sir. Our weapons are more sophisticated, but they require complex support systems. Our soldiers are better trained in conventional tactics, but these humans don't follow conventional tactics. They've weaponized unpredictability itself." The Admiral turned his attention back to the holographic display of Earth. From space, it looked so peaceful. Blue oceans, white clouds, green and brown continents that showed no sign of the dangerous species inhabiting them. Yet the data painted a picture of a world populated by natural-born warriors whose entire civilization seemed geared toward producing the most effective killers in known space. "What about their civilian population?" Kethvar asked. "Surely their non-military citizens would be easier to control." Zixtal's expression grew even more troubled. "That's perhaps the most disturbing aspect of all, sir. The distinction between human civilians and military personnel is fluid. Their entire population receives basic combat training through various means. They have organizations that teach children to fight, sports that simulate warfare, and entertainment media that glorifies military service. The data showed that human civilians regularly engaged in activities that would be considered military training by other species. They practiced marksmanship as recreation, learned survival skills for entertainment, and competed in physical challenges that mimicked combat scenarios. Even their children played games that taught tactical thinking and aggression. Look at this. Zixtal highlighted a particular cultural phenomenon. They call it hunting. Humans track and kill dangerous predators, not for food or protection, but purely for the challenge. They deliberately seek out creatures that could kill them, then attempt to kill them first using minimal equipment. Kethvar watched footage of human hunters stalking massive predators armed with primitive projectile weapons. They showed no fear. only focused determination as they pursued creatures that outweighed them by hundreds of pounds and possessed natural weapons far superior to human biology. Yet somehow, they consistently emerged victorious. Their entire species is essentially a military organization disguised as a civilization, the Admiral realized. Every human is a potential soldier, and every human community is a potential guerrilla warfare cell. The implications for occupation became clear. The Zephyrian Empire's standard conquest protocol involved defeating the enemy military, capturing key infrastructure, and establishing administrative control over the civilian population. This approach worked, because most species maintained clear distinctions between combatants and non-combatants. Humans seem to view every member of their species as a defender of their territory. "Sir, there's one more thing," Zixtel said hesitantly. "The psychological profiles our xenopsychologists have developed, they're disturbing." The display shifted to show psychological analyses of human behavior under extreme stress. The results defied everything Kethvar thought he understood about intelligent behavior. When faced with impossible odds, humans didn't break down or surrender. Instead, they became more creative, more determined, and more dangerous. They have a saying, Zixtel quoted from the cultural database, "The only easy day was yesterday." They deliberately make their training more difficult than actual combat, so that when they face real enemies, the experience is almost relaxing by comparison. Kethvar absorbed this information with growing unease. The Zephyrian military philosophy emphasized efficiency and overwhelming force to minimize casualties and end conflicts quickly. The idea of deliberately making training harder than combat seemed counterproductive, yet the results spoke for themselves. Human warriors consistently performed at peak efficiency under the worst possible conditions. "Admiral," Zixtel said quietly, "I recommend we reconsider our invasion plans. Perhaps we could attempt diplomatic contact first, assess their actual capabilities through direct observation rather than relying on reconnaissance data." For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Kethvar found himself genuinely uncertain about the outcome of a potential conflict. Every piece of data suggested that while the Zephyrian Empire would ultimately prevail through superior technology and numbers, the cost would be unlike anything they had ever experienced. These humans wouldn't simply surrender when faced with superior force. They would fight with a ferocity and determination that could turn even a successful invasion into a Pyrrhic victory. "Continue monitoring their activities," Kethvar commanded. "I want comprehensive analysis of their military capabilities before we proceed. And Zixtel, prepare contingency plans. If we do invade Earth, we need to be ready for a type of warfare we've never encountered before." As the command staff dispersed to carry out their orders, Admiral Kethvar remained on the bridge, staring at the peaceful blue planet that had suddenly become the most dangerous target in Zephyrian expansion history. For the first time since he had begun his military career, he found himself hoping that diplomacy might succeed where force had always prevailed before. The humans of Earth continued their daily lives, unaware that their very nature had already begun to instill fear in an alien empire that had never known defeat. Their reputation as warriors was about to be tested against the most advanced military force in known space, and neither side could predict the outcome of such an unprecedented conflict. Captain Marcus Chen adjusted his tactical headset as he reviewed the morning intelligence briefing in the underground command center buried 300 feet beneath NORAD's Cheyenne Mountain facility. The past 72 hours had brought humanity's first confirmed contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, and the news wasn't good. Electromagnetic signatures detected by deep space monitoring stations indicated massive alien vessels positioning themselves at the edge of Earth's solar system. "What's our assessment of their capabilities?" Chen asked the gathered intelligence analysts. His voice carried the steady calm of a career military officer, but his eyes reflected the weight of knowing that humanity faced its greatest challenge. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the chief xenotechnology analyst, manipulated the holographic display, showing intercepted alien transmissions. "Based on their energy signatures and vessel configurations, we're looking at technology several centuries ahead of our current capabilities. Their ships appear to be powered by controlled fusion reactions, and their weapons systems emit energy readings that suggest directed plasma weapons." Chen studied the tactical projections with growing concern. The alien fleet consisted of dozens of massive vessels, each one larger than Earth's biggest aircraft carriers. Intelligence estimates suggested they carried enough firepower to destroy entire cities with single volleys. Yet something about the enemy's behavior patterns didn't fit standard invasion protocols. Why haven't they attacked? Chen wondered aloud. If they possess such overwhelming technological superiority, what are they waiting for? Lieutenant Colonel Jennifer Hayes, the base's strategic planning officer, highlighted sections of the intercepted communications. That's what concerns our linguistic analysis team. The aliens have been monitoring our communications and military exercises for weeks. They appear to be conducting extensive reconnaissance before making any aggressive moves. The implications were troubling. An enemy with sufficient firepower to destroy Earth from orbit was instead investing time and resources in detailed intelligence gathering. This suggested either unusual caution or respect for humanity's defensive capabilities that didn't seem warranted by the technological disparity between the species. Sir, Dr. Martinez continued, we've detected what appears to be internal debate within their command structure. Our best translation algorithms suggest disagreement about how to proceed with their invasion plans. Chen found this particularly interesting. Military forces confident in their overwhelming superiority typically didn't engage in extended strategic discussions about obviously inferior enemies. Either these aliens were extremely cautious by nature, or they had discovered something about humanity that gave them pause. Show me everything we know about their reconnaissance activities, Chen commanded. The display shifted to show a global map dotted with red indicators marking locations where alien probe activity had been detected. The pattern revealed sophisticated intelligence gathering focused specifically on human military installations, training facilities, and combat units. They're not just studying our weapons technology, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes observed. They're analyzing our tactical doctrine, training methods, and personnel capabilities. This level of detailed reconnaissance suggests they view us as a legitimate threat despite our technological disadvantage. Chen walked over to examine the data more closely. The alien probes had specifically targeted special operations bases, Marine Corps training facilities, and active combat zones where human forces were engaged in ongoing conflicts. They weren't just learning about human capabilities, they were studying human behavior under extreme stress. Have we identified any patterns in their probe losses? Chen asked. Martinez brought up a new display showing probe destruction incidents. That's where it gets interesting, sir. They've lost 9 reconnaissance probes, and in every case, the destruction occurred when the probes were detected by human forces. Our pilots and ground units have shown remarkable success in tracking and destroying technology that should be invisible to our detection systems. Chen reviewed the incident reports. In one case, an Air Force pilot flying an F-22 Raptor had somehow detected and destroyed an alien probe using conventional missiles. The pilot's after-action report described intuitive awareness of something wrong in his airspace, followed by rapid detection and engagement of a target that shouldn't have been visible to his aircraft's sensors. Human combat intuition, Chen murmured. They're learning that our soldiers possess capabilities that don't show up in technical specifications. The destroyed probe incidents revealed something significant about human military effectiveness. While alien technology was superior, human warriors possessed intangible qualities that translated into tactical advantages: experience, intuition, adaptability, and what military personnel often called situational awareness were proving to be legitimate force multipliers against technologically superior opponents. Sir, we're receiving a priority communication from the Pentagon, the communications officer announced. General Morrison wants an immediate briefing on alien capabilities and recommended defensive strategies. Chen activated the secure video link connecting him to the highest levels of the U.S. military command structure. General Morrison's weathered face appeared on the main display, flanked by other senior officers and civilian advisors. Captain Chen, what's your assessment of the alien threat? Morrison asked without preamble. Sir, we face an enemy with overwhelming technological superiority who appears to be exercising unusual caution in their approach. Their extended reconnaissance phase suggests they've identified aspects of human defensive capabilities that concern them. Explain. Chen organized his thoughts carefully. General, the aliens possess the technology to destroy our major population centers from orbit without risking a single one of their personnel. Instead, they're conducting detailed intelligence gathering, that focuses specifically on our military capabilities and combat personnel. This suggests they're planning a ground invasion rather than simple orbital bombardment. The implications hung heavy in the digital connection between the Mountain Command Center and the Pentagon. An orbital bombardment would be devastating but brief. A ground invasion meant extended conflict where human military capabilities could be brought to bear against the invaders. Why would they choose the more difficult approach? Ask Secretary of Defense Williams, whose voice carried the stress of someone who had spent the past 3 days in continuous crisis meetings. Unknown, sir, but I have theories. Based on their reconnaissance patterns, they appear to be particularly interested in human behavior under extreme stress. They've lost multiple probes to human forces who detected and destroyed technology that should have been invisible to our sensors. They may have concluded that human warriors possess capabilities that could complicate their invasion plans. General Morrison leaned forward. Are you suggesting they're afraid of us? Chen considered his words carefully. I'm suggesting they respect us enough to invest significant resources in understanding how we fight before they engage us directly. That level of caution from a technologically superior force indicates they've identified something about human military capabilities that concerns them. The conversation continued as military planners discussed defensive strategies and resource allocation. However, Chen found himself thinking about the deeper implications of alien behavior. Throughout human history, technologically superior forces had typically relied on their advantages to achieve quick victories. The Spanish conquistadors hadn't spent months studying Aztec military tactics before invading Mexico. They had simply used their superior weapons to overwhelm their enemies. These aliens were different. They were approaching humanity with the caution typically reserved for opponents who had already proven themselves dangerous. Yet humanity had never fought aliens before, and Earth's military forces had never demonstrated their capabilities against extraterrestrial enemies. So what had convinced the aliens to treat humans as a serious threat? Captain, Dr. Martinez interrupted his thoughts. We're receiving new intelligence from our deep space monitoring network. The alien fleet appears to be repositioning for what our tactical analysis suggests could be a planetary assault. Chen returned his attention to the immediate crisis. The holographic display showed alien vessels moving into orbital positions that would allow them to deploy forces directly to Earth's surface. The reconnaissance phase was apparently concluding, and the invasion was about to begin. All units, this is command. Chen spoke into his tactical communications network. Initiate Defense Condition 1, all personnel to combat positions. This is not a drill. Throughout the facility, alarms began sounding as military personnel rushed to their assigned positions. The mountain base transformed from a monitoring station into a combat command center as officers coordinated defensive preparations across multiple continents. Sir, the communications officer reported, we're receiving similar alerts from Allied military commands worldwide. NATO, CETA, and bilateral defense partners are all reporting alien fleet movements consistent with imminent invasion. Chen watched as tactical displays filled with unit positions and defensive preparations. Human military forces around the world were moving into defensive positions with efficiency that would have impressed any objective observer. Yet against alien technology centuries ahead of Earth's capabilities, conventional military wisdom suggested these preparations were futile gestures. However, something about the aliens' continued caution gave Chen hope that conventional military wisdom might not apply to this unprecedented situation. The enemy's behavior suggested they had identified something about human military capabilities that couldn't be quantified in technical specifications or weapons inventories. Dr. Martinez, pull up the psychological profiles our xenopsychology team developed on the aliens, Chen requested. The display shifted to show behavioral analysis based on intercepted communications and reconnaissance patterns. The alien command structure appeared to follow rigid hierarchical protocols, with decision-making concentrated at senior levels. Their reconnaissance methodology was thorough but cautious, suggesting a military culture that valued comprehensive planning over rapid adaptation. They're methodical, Chen observed. Their entire approach suggests a military philosophy based on overwhelming preparation and minimal risk-taking. Exactly opposite to human military culture, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes added. We train for rapid adaptation and aggressive initiative. Our doctrine emphasizes taking calculated risks to seize tactical advantages. Chen began to see a potential strategic opportunity. If the aliens were indeed cautious by nature and relied heavily on comprehensive planning, then human unpredictability could become a significant tactical advantage. Human military forces trained constantly for scenarios where plans failed, and soldiers had to adapt rapidly to changing circumstances. "Pull up the tactical doctrine files for our Special Operations Forces," Chen commanded. The display showed training methodologies and operational philosophies for humanity's elite military units. These warriors were specifically trained to operate in situations where conventional planning was impossible. They learned to improvise weapons from available materials, adapt to rapidly changing mission parameters, and achieve objectives despite overwhelming odds. Look at this. Chen highlighted specific sections of Special Forces training protocols. "We deliberately train our best warriors for situations where everything goes wrong. We prepare them to fight effectively when their equipment fails, their communications are cut, and their planned objectives become impossible to achieve." The implications became clearer as Chen studied the data. Human military training included extensive preparation for fighting under adverse conditions that most species would consider impossible. Humans practiced combat scenarios where they were outnumbered, outgunned, and operating with minimal support. These were exactly the conditions that would exist if aliens invaded Earth. "Sir," Dr. Hall sang, Martinez said with growing excitement, "look at the historical precedents for human military performance against technologically superior opponents." Chen reviewed historical analyses showing human conflicts where technological disparities had been overcome through superior tactics, determination, and adaptability. Time and again, human forces had defeated enemies with better equipment through innovative thinking and willingness to accept risks that more cautious opponents wouldn't tolerate. The most telling examples involved colonial wars, where European forces with superior weapons had been defeated by indigenous fighters who employed unconventional tactics and demonstrated superior knowledge of local terrain. Human history was filled with examples of technologically inferior forces achieving victory through superior motivation and tactical innovation. The aliens are making the same assumptions that overconfident military forces have made throughout human history, Chen realized. They believe technological superiority guarantees victory. But human military culture had developed specifically to overcome technological disadvantages. Throughout history, humans had rarely enjoyed the luxury of technological superiority in their conflicts. Instead, they had learned to maximize every possible advantage while minimizing their weaknesses. "Captain," the tactical officer announced, "we're detecting atmospheric entry signatures. The alien invasion has begun." Chen watched as radar displays filled with descending contacts representing alien forces entering Earth's atmosphere. The moment humanity had been preparing for since the dawn of space exploration had finally arrived. Yet instead of feeling overwhelmed by the technological mismatch, Chen found himself experiencing the focused calm that came with knowing the real fighting was about to begin. "All units, enemy forces are now entering our operational environment," Chen announced to his global command network. "Remember your training, trust your instincts, and show these aliens why every species that has underestimated human warriors has learned to regret that mistake." The alien forces were about to discover what their comprehensive reconnaissance had failed to fully appreciate: that human military effectiveness couldn't be measured purely in technical specifications. They were about to face warriors whose entire military tradition was built around achieving impossible victories through determination, adaptability, and refusal to accept defeat. Earth's defenders were outnumbered and outgunned, but they possessed something their alien enemies didn't understand. They had been trained by generations of human conflict to fight effectively when everything went wrong, and they were about to demonstrate why cautious enemies throughout history had learned to fear humanity's deadliest warriors. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos crouched behind the rubble of what had been a downtown office building 12 hours earlier, her rifle steady despite the chaos erupting around her position. The alien plasma weapons carved glowing trenches through concrete and steel as if they were cutting through butter. But her squad of Marines had managed to hold this intersection for the past 6 hours against overwhelming odds. The Zephyrian ground forces had landed expecting swift victory against primitive human resistance. Instead, they found themselves engaged in brutal urban warfare that their tactical doctrine had never prepared them for. Santos watched through her scope as another group of alien soldiers advanced down the street. their energy shields shimmering in the smoky air. "Rodriguez, you got eyes on those shield generators?" she whispered into her tactical microphone. "Affirmative, Sergeant. Those power packs on their back seem to be the source. Same vulnerable spot we identified in the last engagement." Santos smiled grimly. The aliens possessed superior technology, but they hadn't learned the first rule of urban combat. Superior equipment meant nothing if your enemy understood your weaknesses better than you did. Her Marines had been studying alien tactics and equipment for the past half day, adapting their strategies with each engagement. Jackson, Morrison, flank left. Rodriguez maintained suppressing fire. "When I give the signal, target those power packs." Santos checked her ammunition count and prepared for another dangerous improvisation that would have horrified alien tactical planners. The Zephyrians advanced with mechanical precision, their formation textbook perfect according to their military doctrine. They maintained proper spacing, coordinated their fire effectively, and used their energy shields to maximum advantage. However, their rigid adherence to standard protocols made their movements predictable to experienced human warriors who had learned to exploit enemy patterns. Santos waited until the alien patrol reached the predetermined kill zone, then gave her signal. "Now!" The Marines executed a maneuver that violated every conventional principle of engagement with superior forces. Instead of seeking cover and engaging from protected positions, they charged directly at the aliens while targeting the vulnerable shield generators. Jackson and Morrison emerged from flanking positions to create crossfire that confused the alien response protocols. The Zephyrian soldiers found themselves facing an attack pattern their training had never covered. Human warriors who should have been seeking protection from superior firepower were instead closing distance aggressively, accepting risks that no rational species would tolerate. The aliens hesitated for crucial seconds, unable to process human tactical thinking. Santos put 3 rounds into an alien power pack, watching sparks fly as the shield generator overloaded. Rodriguez's sniper fire took down 2 more aliens whose shields failed simultaneously. Jackson and Morrison continued their flanking assault, using movement and aggression to deny the aliens time to reorganize their defensive formation. Within 90 seconds, the alien patrol was eliminated. Santos and her squad had once again demonstrated that superior technology couldn't overcome superior tactics and determination. They quickly gathered alien equipment and withdrew to their next defensive position before enemy reinforcements could arrive. "Command, this is Bravo Squad," Santos reported. "Another alien patrol eliminated. We've secured additional plasma weapons and are proceeding to Checkpoint Delta." The response came from Captain Chen's Tactical Coordination Center. "Confirmed, Bravo Squad. Intelligence reports similar successful engagements worldwide. Human forces are consistently outperforming projections against alien ground units." Santos wasn't surprised by this news. Marines trained constantly for situations where they faced technologically superior opponents with superior numbers. The difference was that most enemies eventually learned from their mistakes and adapted their tactics accordingly. These aliens seemed locked into rigid tactical thinking that made them predictable despite their advanced weapons. "Sergeant," Rodriguez called from his overwatch position, "you need to see this." Santos moved to Rodriguez's position and accepted his spotting scope. In the distance, she could see a massive alien armored vehicle advancing through the city streets. The vehicle bristled with weapon systems and appeared heavily shielded against conventional attacks. Behind it marched a full company of alien infantry, apparently using the vehicle as mobile cover. "That's new," Santos observed. "They're adapting their tactics." However, as she studied the alien formation more carefully, Santos began to identify potential vulnerabilities. The armored vehicle was impressive, but it was also constrained by urban terrain. Its massive size forced it to follow predictable routes, and its weapon systems appeared designed for open battlefield engagements rather than close urban combat. "Rodriguez, what's your assessment of that vehicle's weak points?" The sniper studied the target through his high-powered scope. "The track system appears vulnerable to concentrated fire. Those energy projectors need clear lines of sight, so they can't traverse buildings effectively. And look at the escort formation. They're maintaining standard battlefield spacing that's inappropriate for urban terrain." Santos began developing an engagement strategy that would have terrified alien tactical planners. Instead of avoiding the superior enemy force, she was planning to attack it using the urban environment to negate its technological advantages. Jackson, Morrison, we're going to demonstrate why aliens should stay in space where their technology actually gives them an advantage. The plan Santos developed violated every principle of conventional military wisdom. Her four-person squad was going to engage a reinforced alien company supported by heavy armor using nothing but standard infantry weapons and urban terrain. Any military academy would have used such a scenario as an example of tactical suicide. However, Santos and her Marines had advantages that didn't appear in equipment specifications or tactical manuals. They possessed intimate knowledge of urban terrain, experience fighting in confined spaces, and most importantly, tactical thinking that prioritized adaptation over adherence to doctrine. All right, Marines, remember what we learned about alien shield technology. Those generators can't handle rapid frequency changes in incoming fire. Rodriguez, you're going to maintain long-range harassment to keep their attention focused forward. Jackson and Morrison were going underground. Santos led her assault team into the city's storm drain system, using infrastructure that the aliens hadn't mapped during their orbital reconnaissance. Human military training included extensive urban warfare scenarios that utilized every aspect of city environments, including utilities, underground passages, and building interiors. The alien armored vehicle continued its advance, its sensors scanning for threats along predictable approach routes. The Zephyrian tactical doctrine emphasized overwhelming firepower applied along clear lines of sight, which worked effectively in open terrain but created blind spots in complex urban environments. Santos and her team emerged from storm drains directly beneath the alien formation. The Marines had positioned themselves in locations where the vehicle's weapons couldn't engage them without destroying the accompanying infantry. They immediately began targeting the track systems with concentrated small arms fire. The alien response was swift, but ineffective. Their weapon systems were too powerful for close-range urban combat, creating collateral damage that interfered with their own tactical objectives. When they tried to engage the Marines, they destroyed buildings and infrastructure that provided cover for more human ambush positions. Rodriguez now, Santos commanded. The sniper began rapid fire at the vehicle's sensor arrays, using armor-piercing rounds to systematically destroy the alien targeting systems. Each shot was precisely placed to maximize damage to critical components while avoiding the heaviest armor protection. Jackson and Morrison continued their assault on the track system, using a combination of armor-piercing ammunition and improvised explosive devices created from alien energy cells they had captured in previous engagements. The Marines had learned to turn alien technology against itself, using captured power sources to create weapons the aliens hadn't anticipated. Within minutes, the massive alien vehicle was immobilized and blinded. Its escort infantry found themselves engaged in close-quarters combat, where their energy shields were less effective and their superior weapons were offset by human tactical advantages. Santos watched with professional satisfaction as the alien formation disintegrated under pressure from a force they should have easily destroyed. The aliens possessed better individual equipment, but they lacked the tactical flexibility that human Marines developed through constant training in unpredictable scenarios. Command, this is Bravo Squad. We've neutralized the alien heavy unit and are securing the area for intelligence gathering. The response from Tactical Command carried notes of amazement. Bravo Squad, how did a four-person team destroy a reinforced alien company? Same way Marines always defeat superior forces, sir. We used their strengths against them and fought in an environment where our training gave us the advantage. As Santos and her team secured alien equipment for intelligence analysis, she reflected on the broader implications of what was happening worldwide. Human military forces were consistently achieving tactical victories that should have been impossible against technologically superior opponents. The key was understanding that technological superiority only translated to military advantage when it could be effectively applied. Alien weapons designed for open battlefield engagements became liabilities in urban environments where precision and adaptability mattered more than raw firepower. Sergeant, Jackson reported, the alien survivors are attempting to withdraw. Should we pursue? Santos considered the tactical situation. Pursuing a retreating enemy force could lead her squad into prepared positions where alien technological advantages would be more effective. However, allowing the aliens to withdraw meant they would report human capabilities to their command structure. Negative, let them go. Their commanders need to hear about what happened here. Santos made this decision based on strategic thinking that extended beyond immediate tactical concerns. If alien leaders learned that their ground forces were consistently being defeated by supposedly inferior human warriors, they might reconsider their invasion strategy entirely. The psychological impact of repeated tactical defeats could be more valuable than eliminating individual alien units. Human military doctrine emphasized the importance of breaking enemy morale and confidence, which was often more decisive than purely physical destruction. Rodriguez, what's our ammunition status? Sufficient for 2 more major engagements, Sergeant. We've also secured enough alien energy cells to power our equipment for extended operations. Santos nodded with satisfaction. Her squad was not only surviving against overwhelming odds, but actually growing stronger by adapting captured alien technology to human tactical needs. They had learned to recharge their equipment using alien power sources and modify alien weapons to function with human tactical doctrine. This adaptability was proving to be humanity's greatest military asset. While aliens relied on complex supply chains and specialized maintenance for their advanced equipment, human warriors could improvise, adapt, and overcome using whatever resources were available. Command, this is Bravo Squad requesting new mission assignment. Current area is secure, and we're ready for additional tasking. The response came with undertones of respect that hadn't been present in earlier communications. Bravo Squad. Intelligence indicates alien command units are establishing a forward headquarters in Sector 7. Your mission is reconnaissance and harassment. Do not attempt direct assault. Santos smiled at the final instruction. Her superiors were still thinking in conventional terms where a 4-person squad couldn't engage enemy headquarters units. However, conventional thinking hadn't applied to anything that had happened since the alien invasion began. Copy, Command. Bravo Squad moving to Sector 7 for reconnaissance. As her squad prepared to move toward their next objective, Santos reflected on how the invasion was progressing differently than either side had anticipated. The aliens expected swift victory through technological superiority, while human commanders expected desperate defensive actions against overwhelming odds. Instead, the conflict was developing into something unprecedented. A war where technologically superior forces were being consistently outmaneuvered by tactically superior opponents who refused to fight according to conventional military logic. The aliens were about to learn that human warriors didn't just fight to survive, they fought to win, and they would adapt any strategy, accept any risk, and exploit any weakness to achieve victory. Earth's defenders were proving that the deadliest weapon in any military conflict wasn't advanced technology, but the refusal to accept defeat. Admiral Kethvar stood before the holographic display in his command center, watching with growing disbelief as tactical reports flooded in from Zephyrian ground forces across Earth's surface. The invasion that was supposed to demonstrate the Empire's overwhelming military superiority had become a nightmare of unexpected resistance and impossible defeats. Status report from all ground units, he commanded, though he dreaded hearing the response. Commander Zixtal approached with visible reluctance. Admiral, our casualty reports are unprecedented. We've lost 67% of our initial landing forces, and the survivors are requesting immediate evacuation from multiple combat zones. Kethvar's 3 eyes focused on the tactical displays showing unit positions across Earth's continents. Red indicators marked destroyed Zephyrian formations, while green icons showed human forces that continued to operate despite facing overwhelming technological disadvantages. The pattern defied everything he understood about military science. How are primitive warriors armed with kinetic weapons destroying our advanced battle groups? Kethvar demanded. Sir, the humans aren't fighting according to any recognized tactical doctrine. They consistently engage our forces in environments where our technological advantages become liabilities. Our energy weapons are too powerful for close urban combat. Our armor is too heavy for the underground warfare they prefer, and our shield technology is vulnerable to their rapid-fire projectile weapons. The Admiral studied specific engagement reports, each one more disturbing than the last. A single human squad had destroyed an entire armored column by using captured Zephyrian energy cells as improvised explosives. Another group of human warriors had eliminated a company of elite Zephyrian soldiers by luring them into a building that the humans then collapsed using primitive chemical explosives. They're using our own technology against us, Kethvar observed grimly. How did they learn to adapt our equipment so quickly? Our xenopsychologists believe it relates to human cognitive flexibility, sir, where our soldiers are trained to follow specific protocols for specific situations. Humans appear capable of improvising solutions to problems they've never encountered before. Cathvar pulled up psychological profiles of captured human soldiers. The interrogation reports painted a picture of warriors whose mental processes were fundamentally different from Zephyrian thinking. Humans seemed to view obstacles as puzzles to be solved rather than barriers to be overcome through superior force. Look at this report. Zixtel highlighted a particular incident. A human warrior named Santos eliminated a full battle group using standard infantry weapons and urban terrain. When our forces attempted to engage her using proper tactical formations, she exploited the limitations those formations created in confined spaces. The engagement analysis showed tactical thinking that bordered on the incomprehensible. The human commander had deliberately positioned her small force in locations where Zephyrian advantages became disadvantages. She had used the aliens' own firepower to create cover and concealment, turning their superior weapons into obstacles to their own tactical effectiveness. She fought in sewers, sir, underground passages where our energy shields were ineffective and our heavy weapons couldn't be brought to bear. Then she emerged in locations our reconnaissance had identified as secure, striking from directions our tactical doctrine said were impossible. Cathvar studied the combat footage recovered from destroyed Zephyrian equipment. The human warrior called Santos moved through urban terrain with an intuitive understanding that suggested intimate familiarity with three-dimensional combat environments. She anticipated Zephyrian responses and positioned her forces accordingly, staying ahead of enemy adaptation through superior tactical thinking. Admiral, the communications officer announced, "We're receiving a priority transmission from the High Command. They're requesting a full tactical assessment of the invasion progress." Cathvar dreaded this communication. The Zephyrian Empire had expected reports of swift victory and successful planetary occupation. Instead, he would have to explain how the most advanced military force in known space was being systematically defeated by primitive warriors using obsolete weapons. High Admiral Vextar to Admiral Cathvar, report your status. The holographic projection of High Admiral Vextar materialized in the command center. His forearms crossed in a gesture that conveyed imperial authority. Vextar commanded the entire Zephyrian military and had personally overseen the conquest of dozens of worlds. His presence indicated the highest levels of the Empire were taking personal interest in the Earth invasion. High Admiral, we are encountering unprecedented resistance from the human population. Our initial tactical assessments appear to have been inadequate. Explain. Cathvar chose his words carefully. Sir, the humans possess military capabilities that don't correspond to their technological level. They consistently defeat our forces through tactical innovations that our doctrine doesn't account for. Vextar's expression darkened. Are you telling me that primitive warriors are defeating the Zephyrian Imperial Navy? Sir, they're not fighting like primitive warriors. They adapt to our tactics faster than we can adapt to theirs. They turn our technological advantages into vulnerabilities through superior understanding of three-dimensional combat environments. The High Admiral studied tactical reports from multiple engagement zones. These casualty figures are unacceptable. How many human warriors are we facing? Intelligence estimates suggest the entire human population should be considered combatants, sir. Their society appears to train all citizens for warfare through various cultural mechanisms. We're not fighting an army, we're fighting an entire species of warriors. Vextar absorbed this information with growing concern. The Zephyrian Empire's conquest strategy was based on defeating enemy military forces and establishing control over civilian populations. If the humans maintained no meaningful distinction between civilians and combatants, traditional occupation protocols would be impossible. What about orbital bombardment? Destroy their population centers and eliminate the resistance. Cathvar had anticipated this suggestion. Sir, orbital bombardment would destroy the infrastructure and resources we intended to acquire through conquest. Additionally, our intelligence indicates that humans have dispersed their military capabilities throughout their population centers. Destroying cities would eliminate the economic value of planetary occupation. More troubling was intelligence suggesting that orbital bombardment might actually strengthen human resistance rather than eliminating it. Human historical records showed that their species often fought more effectively when facing existential threats. Destroying their cities could transform the invasion into a war of extermination that the Zephyrian Empire wasn't prepared to wage. "Hi, Admiral," Zixtel interjected. "Our xenobiologists have identified concerning aspects of human physiology. Their stress response system actually improves combat performance under extreme conditions. Threatening their survival appears to make them more dangerous rather than more compliant." Vextar studied biological analyses of human warriors captured during the early stages of the invasion. The data revealed that humans possessed natural combat enhancement mechanisms that activated under extreme stress. Unlike most species, which became less effective under pressure, humans actually improved their performance when facing overwhelming odds. "They become more dangerous when threatened?" Vextar asked with disbelief. "Yes, sir. Their neurochemistry floods their systems with stimulants that increase strength, speed, and pain tolerance. More importantly, extreme stress appears to enhance their cognitive flexibility and tactical innovation. They literally think better when they're fighting for survival." The implications were staggering. The Zephyrian Empire's standard conquest protocol involved applying overwhelming pressure to break enemy morale and force surrender. Against humans, this approach appeared to trigger biological responses that made them more formidable opponents. "Sir," Kethvar continued, "we've also identified another concerning factor. Human warriors form extremely strong social bonds that override individual survival instincts. They fight not just for abstract concepts, but for personal relationships with their fellow warriors." Vextar reviewed psychological profiles showing the depth of human military unit cohesion. Zephyrian soldiers served the Empire with professional dedication, but human warriors served each other with emotional connections that approached family relationships. This created motivation structures that were difficult to understand and impossible to break. They won't retreat to preserve their own lives because that would mean abandoning their comrades, Zixtel explained. They won't surrender to save themselves because that would endanger their fellow warriors. Every tactical option that works against rational species fails against humans because they don't prioritize individual survival. Admiral Kethvar pulled up the most disturbing intelligence report of all. "Hi, Admiral, we've confirmed that human military culture actively cultivates these psychological characteristics. They deliberately create emotional bonds between warriors and train them to value group survival over individual survival." The report detailed human military training that seemed designed to produce the most effective warriors possible. Humans didn't just teach combat skills. They taught psychological resilience, tactical adaptability, and unshakable loyalty to fellow warriors. Their entire military culture was optimized for producing soldiers who would fight effectively under the worst possible conditions. "Look at this training methodology." Kethvar highlighted specific sections of the intelligence report. "They deliberately subject their own warriors to extreme stress, sleep deprivation, and physical hardship. They break down individual ego structures and rebuild them around group identity. They create warriors who literally cannot conceive of personal failure that doesn't involve group failure." Vextar studied the training footage recovered from human military facilities. Young humans were subjected to conditions that would be considered torture in civilized space, yet those who survived the process emerged as something approaching perfect soldiers. They possessed technical skills, physical conditioning, psychological resilience, and most importantly, absolute dedication to their fellow warriors. They weaponized loyalty itself, the High Admiral realized. Yes, sir. And they've been perfecting these techniques for thousands of years through constant warfare against each other. Every human military tradition represents centuries of learning how to defeat other humans who possessed similar capabilities. The strategic implications became clear as Vextar absorbed the full scope of what the Zephyrian Empire faced. Earth wasn't just defended by warriors, it was inhabited by a species that had evolved specifically to be effective at warfare. Every human possessed combat potential that had been refined through millennia of conflict. Admiral Kethvar, what are your recommendations for proceeding with the invasion? For the first time in his military career, Kethvar found himself unable to recommend a path to victory. High Admiral, continuing the invasion will result in casualties that could cripple the Imperial Navy. Our technological advantages are insufficient to overcome human tactical superiority in ground combat. Are you suggesting withdrawal? Sir, I'm suggesting we reconsider whether Earth is worth the cost of conquest. The humans have demonstrated capabilities that make them potentially valuable as allies rather than subjects. Perhaps diplomatic contact would serve imperial interests better than military occupation. Vexstar considered this unprecedented recommendation. The Zephyrian Empire had never retreated from an invasion, but they had also never encountered an enemy like humanity. The cost of conquering Earth was becoming prohibitive, while the value of conquest was diminishing as human resistance destroyed the infrastructure the Empire sought to acquire. "High Admiral," a communications officer interrupted. "We are receiving a transmission from the human government. They're requesting direct communication." Vexstar authorized the transmission, and the holographic display filled with the image of a human leader. Secretary of Defense Williams appeared calm and professional despite the ongoing invasion of his planet. "Admiral Vexstar, I presume?" "I'm Secretary Williams, and I represent Earth's Unified Defense Command. We wish to discuss terms for ending this conflict." "Terms?" Vexstar responded with surprise. "You are in no position to negotiate terms." Williams smiled with the confidence of someone who knew something his opponent didn't. "Admiral, your ground forces are being systematically eliminated by troops armed with weapons your empire considers primitive. Your invasion is failing, and continuing it will cost you ships and personnel you can't afford to lose. You cannot defeat the Imperial Navy with kinetic weapons and chemical explosives. We don't need to defeat your Navy, Admiral. We just need to make conquest more expensive than you're willing to pay. Every day you remain in Earth's orbit costs you resources and personnel. Every engagement with our forces teaches us more about your capabilities while demonstrating that your technological advantages don't guarantee tactical success." Vexstar studied the human leader with growing respect. Williams spoke with the confidence of someone whose forces were winning despite facing overwhelming odds. More importantly, he understood the strategic realities that Zephyrian leadership was only beginning to appreciate. "What are you proposing?" Vexstar asked. "Mutual withdrawal and diplomatic contact. Your empire clearly possesses technology that could benefit humanity, and our military capabilities could serve imperial interests in future conflicts with other species. We propose alliance rather than conquest." The suggestion was unprecedented in Zephyrian history, but it addressed the strategic realities both species faced. The Empire needed effective ground forces for future conquests, while humanity needed technology to defend Earth against other potential threats. Admiral Kethvar watched as the foundation of Zephyrian imperial policy shifted in real time. For the first time in the Empire's history, they were negotiating with an enemy they couldn't defeat, rather than dictating terms to conquered subjects. The humans had accomplished something no species in the galaxy had ever achieved. They had forced the Zephyrian Empire to respect them as equals through sheer military effectiveness. Earth's defenders had proven that the deadliest warriors in space weren't necessarily those with the most advanced weapons, but those with the determination and skill to use whatever weapons they possessed to maximum effect. As negotiations began for humanity's first interstellar alliance, both species started learning that the galaxy's most dangerous predators weren't those with the biggest teeth, but those with the intelligence and courage to bite back when threatened.